MK Mariner every Saturday on the Alcamba Times and experience extensive conversations on a variety of topics, including national and international headlines, breaking issues, and major developments in politics, business, innovation, science, and sports, along with inspiring stories and expert analysis to provide a comprehensive understanding of the news.
Hello and warm welcome to yet another exciting edition of the Final Take with me, Seni MK Mariner. Here is a look at what's coming up. Imagine prospect for growth, transitional justice, and the promise of inclusive political landscape, embracing greater access to rights and services in the Gambia's new democracy. We discuss the Gambia's political environment with political scientist, Professor Abdoulaye Sen. Also coming up, the rise of Kamala Harris. The Final Take examine the implication of the U.S. election on Africa as Democrats rally behind President Joe Biden's proposed nominee to take on Donald Trump in 2024 U.S. elections. The Final Take will also examine the ongoing effort to build the Gambia's human rights record, asking right activist Famara Jawane what is at stake to strengthen the existing gain. That's the Final Take with me, Seni MK Mariner, exploring a busy week of news and current affairs. To start with, the emerging democratic environment strengthening transitional justice and Gambia's drive to build an inclusive political system that especially help women contribution and participation of people. Under a new democratic dispensation, pushing programs to reform the country's difficult past. The Barrow government is driving a revitalization policies, engaging a broader political spectrum. But how will this shape the new democracy and its path to more inclusive representation? Professor Abdoulaye Sen joins us live from Banjul to discuss the unique dynamics shaping Gambia's politics and its impact on the new democracy. Many thanks for joining us, Professor Sen.
Thank you, Mr. Marina. I'm glad to join you from Banjul.
Yeah, thank you. Let's start with the legislation. Professor, Gambia faces a momentum of parliamentary action, such as the recent move to unban the anti-FGM law, which failed after a massive debate on women's issues, representation, and the need to increase their participation in decision-making. How are these discussions influencing the political setting in the Gambia, Prof?
Well, I believe this was a major victory for women and girls in the Gambia, and certainly for the budding democracy of the country. It galvanized a group of very influential organizations that were able to put their heads together in an effort to maintain the ban on FGM. I think it speaks volumes about this democracy and its future.
Prof, as a political scientist, what are implications of these decisions making round in the country, the FGM law? Do you think this will impact the outcome of 2026 presidential elections?
Well, I think it is really up to the opposition political parties to use it as an organizing tool to reach out to women and girls that are of age to vote, and use it as a basis really to drive their agenda in the forthcoming elections. I think the arena or landscape is certainly very fertile for change as I see it. And the implications for overall change in direction is also very fertile. Overall, I do believe that the momentum for change, especially amongst those who are most affected adversely by economic conditions, youth, women, and the so-called marginalized, portends well for future change in this country.
Absolutely, Prof. Your previous work cover civil-military relations and its roles in a robust democratization. As the government moves to restore confidence in the army, how important will a robust civil-military dialogue support transitional justice in the Gambia?
Well, when it comes to security and in particular civil military relations, this is a very pivotal area that government needs to address very carefully and pointedly. It would seem to me that this area has been neglected, especially as it relates to the military. I think there are grievances that need to be addressed within the military itself to curb any potential problems in future. And I'm talking about, the presence of other military forces in the country, growing competition between them and Gambia's military itself, and uh, the growing divisions within the Gambian military itself make for a very fertile environment for instability, to say the least.
Prof, let me give you the context of how the ECOWAS military interventions come to Gambia. This was in 2017 when the former president refused to step down. ECOWAS mobilized forces to come and restore democracy. It's been 7 years since we witnessed the new change. Do you think that the Gambia still need the ECOWAS stabilization force in the Gambia? If yes, why? If no, why?
I believe the presence of that force has more to do with preservation of the current government and its existence. It is feared that if they were to leave the country, there might be instability and chaos as we speak. So really, it's not so much for safeguarding the country itself, but Barra's regime, to say the least. I don't think we need it. I think Gambian forces can be trained enough to take care of any security situations in the country. So in a nutshell, I don't believe we need it. I think it is the Barra regime, more than anything else, that needs it to maintain itself in power.
Why do you think there is this level of distrust between the government and the military forces, the Gambia military, that's the Gambia Armed Forces? Why this distrust 7 years on after the change?
Well, many young democracies are in so many ways very fragile. And there is always a looming threat posed by the military, even if they stay in the barracks. Because they can always pounce upon one mistake or another, one malfeasance or another, corruption, bad roads, tribalism, as a justification to come into power, as happened in 1994. So even though it is a burgeoning democracy, as others, the military will always serve as a threat to existing political and democratic institutions. And I believe this is the why the tension remains. And I don't believe Barrow or President Barrow has made any overtures to the military institutions and organizations and the personnel to make the relations better. In fact, I think there is a divide between the executive and the military. And in doing so, it only festers the kind of distrust that already exists between the executive and these institutions.
As a political scientist, Prof, how do the government bridge this gap of mistrust between the military and the government to avoid what have happened in other parts of the world?
This is a very difficult question, but I will give it a try.
Yeah.
If you look at the example of other countries, what they have done is to bring in part of the military establishment into the civil service and vice versa. More importantly, what they do is to give them the perks, the promotions, the salaries. In other words, keep them happy and make all tensions as, fewer tensions as possible in order to make sure that they remain in the barracks. Ultimately, it will take very creative policies from government by way of pay or wages, promotions, uh, and some other things to basically assuage any problems that are likely to arise between government and the military. But really, there is a lot of work that has been done in this area. And there are many out there who can really sit around a table and hammer out a policy that could help government in making the relationship between it and the military more amicable.
Prof, when this new government came in 2017, they embarked on a lot of reforms, including security sector reform, the Truth and Reparation Commission, the building of a new draft constitution. But it seems all of these reforms have not gone any far. What implication will the lack of security sector reform have on the country's democratization process?
That is a major deficit. In fact, the security sector reform was one thing that I was involved in, as well as the TRRC and many other things. You will recall that I did write a piece on the draft constitution, among other things. I mean, what I'm basically seeing is a detransitioning. Rather than having fundamental reforms to deepen democracy in the country. What is occurring really is undermining these institutions and in the end, really making democracy more feeble. So while there is talk about transitional justice, I don't really see much of it, even though there are efforts, and there have been efforts made to bring judicial justice. There are reparations for victims in progress, and so many other things that are also in place. But when it comes to the Constitution, which is more fundamental, and the voting of the diasporans in particular, very little has been done, even though a bill is supposed to come in pretty soon to the National Assembly and it may pass. But really, overall, Gambia's transition after 7 years has been very slow and in the end, not very effective.
Is it safe to say that this is because there is a lack of political commitment from the state to ensure that these reforms take place smoothly?
I think it is safe to say that, yes.
Okay. Prof, thank you very much. My next question is, you wrote a book, you wrote a couple of books. One of them is The Paradox of Third World Democratization Tackles the Challenges Grappling African countries, especially ECOWAS nations, which now face a breakaway bloc in the Sahel. Can this weaken gains made in the political stability across the region?
You know, about 40 years ago, maybe less, 30 years ago, an American scholar by the name of Pat McGowan made the prediction using some theoretical analysis and models that in this day and age and the decade that we now are in, there will be deepening inequality and chaos in the sub-region, partly because of outcomes that obtain from the global economy impacting our sub-region. Growing tensions, growing inequality, growing violence, and so forth and so on, and more military interventions. So the prediction that he had made earlier has been borne out by the evidence. I believe the breakaway bloc, Niger, Mauritania, not Mauritania, Mali, and a few other countries, Burkina Faso indicate that there is growing tensions within these countries and their surrogates, the so-called democracies. And my interpretation is ultimately it will take good leadership, especially among civilian democratic governments, to nudge these countries in a more democratic direction. I believe Senegal is taking that leadership,
Yeah.
and I think they should rightly do so. I believe Nigeria has not lived up to expectations, nor has Ghana. I believe with the mandate that the new Senegalese PASTEF government has, it must use its wherewithal to restore democracy and confidence in the sub-region. And it is not a question of size. Cuba in the Cold War played a very important role. So did Jamaica. And what I'm suggesting is, it is not a question of size or resources. Senegal is poised to move up to the next stage of pushing the agenda for change and democracy in our sub-region, because Ghana, Nigeria, and the bigger countries have not done a good job at promoting these ideals.
Prof, there has been mistrust also between the ECOWAS leadership and their citizens. Most of them feel that ECOWAS is a toothless bulldog with backings from Western countries to do
Yes.
their bidding in Africa. Do you think that there is a mistrust between ECOWAS and its citizens? And how can ECOWAS work to ensure that the people that put them in power, they are held accountable?
ECOWAS is as strong as its member states. And the members themselves, for the most part, find themselves in very precarious political and economic conditions. That certainly is going to reflect on ECOWAS itself. There is distrust, as you suggested earlier, between ECOWAS and its citizenry. And it will take a lot of effort and sharing that neo-colonial link for it to enjoy higher levels of legitimacy. But it has to begin from the constituent units and members for ECOWAS to be any more effective than it really is today. So strengthening democracy locally and throughout the sub-region could strengthen and give more legitimacy to ECOWAS itself.
Thank you, Professor Sen. For those joining us, this is the final take with me, Seni MK Marena. Live in the studio from Banjul is Professor Abdoulaye Sen, the Executive Director of Nyansane Institute in Banjul. Prof, you have written extensively on the country's past and outlook for the transitional justice under Jammeh. How will effective implementation of the white paper recommendation influence democratic objective and political governance in the Gambia?
Wow, that would be great if they can, even if they do only maybe half of the recommendations of the white paper. That would have further, I would believe, democracy and confidence in the country. I think it will restore a lot of goodwill between the population as well as the government. Ultimately, I think it is good. Trying Jammeh and bringing others to book would go a long way in legitimizing and giving credence to the transitional justice system in Gambia.
Bringing Jammeh to justice has been a call
Can you hear me?
Activists, victims. Yes, I say bringing Jammeh to justice has been a call by activists and victims. How optimistic are you that Jammeh will one day have a day in court? Do you think Jammeh will have
as we speak, there is talk about a hybrid court.
Yes.
I hope so. A few others have been taken to court and have been sentenced, and I don't want to mention their names. And I think Jammeh should be along the way to facing justice, not in Gambia necessarily, but somewhere else using a hybrid court system. If it happens in Gambia, great. If the security can be ascertained, even better. But I don't see why Jammeh ultimately wouldn't face the music.
Thank you very much. That's Professor Abdullah Sen delivering an insightful perspective on the Gambia's political landscape with focus on transitional justice system. Many thanks for joining us, Professor Sen. It's great talking to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sana. It's good to see you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. This is the final take with me, Seni MK Marina. Let's take the conversation to the US election, which are nearing climax as the world's biggest democracy prepares for high-stake presidential vote in November. Likely Democratic nominee and President Biden choosing candidate for the top job, Vice President Kamala Harris, is the centerpiece of this election as Trump misses a rematch with Joe Biden, who announced his exit to allow a younger candidate to lead the Democrats in the November election. Who is Kamala Harris? How can she lead the Democratic Party to victory come November? And how will her leadership affect Africa? Let's now get answers from Melvin Food, founder and president for Constituency for Africa, a civil society movement in America, working with African governments. Melvin, thank you for joining us from Washington, D.C. Have the Democrats restored their chances of a break in the election with emergence of Kamala Harris? Today sees a symbol of hope for many, including women. But how might Africa benefit from her leadership, Mr. Food?
Well, thank you very much for having me. I appreciated the predecessor. My predecessor speaking was very good and very. I learned a lot about Gambia. We're in the middle of our presidential election lead up to the campaigning, and every day some new development. But it's an exciting time in many respects here in the United States. On the other hand, we have to, we're supposed to be a democracy, and everybody's supposed to have their opinion, and the people will speak. And so, everybody's nervous. Everybody's not sure of what's going to happen. 3 days ago, I was sure the Republicans were going to win. I was sure Donald Trump was going to come back to the White House. But today, I'm not so sure anymore, And Kamala has surprised everybody with her ability, her knowledge, her commitment. She's a very tough person. We didn't know that. So as we talk right now, it's almost like a toss-up. But the Democrats will be having their convention in the 3 weeks, which should give a big boost to Kamala Harris. And if I had to wager right now, I would think that Kamala Harris will be the next president of the United States. I'm not hearing. I didn't hear you. I didn't hear. I'm not hearing you. Am I muted?
Are you hearing me, Melvin, now?
I can hear you now, yes.
Okay, you can hear me well. Okay. Thank you for that brilliant conversation. So a lot of people are saying that it will be hard for Kamala Harris to defeat Donald Trump. You have worked with a lot of Democrats, and you have experience with the Democratic Party. What do you think Kamala Harris will be able to make in this election? Do you think that he stands chances of defeating Donald Trump come November elections?
I think she absolutely does. One of the biggest questions early when Biden was running against Trump was that these are two old men. And even Trump said he's too old to be president. And Trump is only 3 years younger than Biden. But now enter Kamala Harris, who is substantially younger than Trump and very mobile, very youthful, but she's also very dynamic. And so one of the things that we learned over the last 3 days is that Kamala Harris as vice president, you can never overshadow your president. And so if the president is not dynamic, you can't be dynamic. And so I think Kamala was kind of like in a shell as the vice president. But as soon as she stepped out of the vice presidency onto the table as a candidate for the president of the United States, we see a whole new Kamala Harris, who's very quick, who's very dynamic. You're not going to out-talk her. Trump is he's a master at bullying you from the microphone. He can call you a name. He can make you feel very small. Not in the case of Kamala. She's a former prosecutor. You know, she knows the legal system very well. So you're not gonna bully her the way you have bullied other candidates. So that in itself is going to change the paradigm. And now she's also calling forth on a lot of issues. She's talking about the issue of abortion, and she's talking about issues that affect women. You know, well, Trump is in a very defensive position now. You know, and she also has mobilized the African American community like I've never seen it ever since Barack Obama. I haven't seen it mobilized the way Kamala Harris has mobilized. She has got sororities and fraternities. She's got the historical black colleges, and she's got everyday people now writing checks, weighing in, and helping to mobilize for this November election. And so within a very short period of time, we now see the polls say neck and neck, but at the same time, the Democrats are just now stepping up. Obama just yesterday endorsed it.
Yeah,
you know, and that's big. The convention is going to be in Chicago, which is Obama's hometown. That's big, also. You know.
So with these endorsements, Mr. Food, you think that the Democrats will automatically give Kamala Harris the lead to be the Democrats' front runner, because she got a lot of endorsement from most of these governors, most of the senators. The latest is President Obama. So do you think this is an automatic qualification for him to be the Democratic nominee for the November elections?
Yeah, Kamala Harris will be the nominee for the Democratic Party. She's going to be the nominee, no doubt about it. You know, it's not even in a question there's nobody running against her, put it that way. There's no credible person running against her in any kind of way. It's a fait accompli. Now, the only issue is the platform that she's going to run on, and that's being negotiated. You know, what are the key things, you know, that the Democrats want to put forth in the election? That's all being discussed in dialogue, but it'll all be in place before the convention in Chicago.
You met Kamala Harris, you met Joe Biden, you met most of these high-profile leaders in the United States. What is the feeling around in DC about Kamala Harris ascending to power, becoming, you know, if she wins, the first female U.S. president, and also the first Black woman to be the president of the United States?
Everybody's excited. Like I said, after the end of the Republican convention, everybody felt despondent, depressed. You know, oh boy, this guy is coming back. Everybody felt that way. But today, nobody feels that way, you know. And I think she's in a very good position. Not only is she a woman, she's extraordinarily qualified, you know. She has been the vice president for the past 4 years. So she has been a senior official in many positions before that. Nobody questions her ability. That's not questionable. They try to pin her on policies that, of the Biden administration. Well, any policy that of the Biden administration was President Biden's policy. We talked about the immigration policy on the southern border and all that. Well, she was not the president, so she could not make any final decisions. Even though she was the vice president, she was not the president. So I think here in Washington, there's a lot of enthusiasm behind the campaign of Kamala Harris. There's no doubt that she would be the Democratic nominee for president of the United States. And the only question will be the election in November. And I think that anybody who had any doubts about Kamala Harris, those doubts have been removed over the past 3 days.
Thank you very much for those listening. This is the final take with me, Seni Marena. With me in the studio live from Washington, D.C. is a prominent civil society leader, Melvin Food, founder and president of Constituency for Africa. Melvin, you have been working on African issues for more than 40 years. I first met you in Banjul 10 years ago. Could you describe the current political climate in America as an opportunity, to strengthen partnership with Africa, particularly considering a Harris victory in November? How do you see U.S.-Africa relationship with coming of Kamala Harris as the president of the United States, should he be voted in November presidential elections?
Well, I've always maintained the biggest challenge to building a relationship with Africa is that most Americans are uneducated, undereducated, or miseducated about Africa. Most Americans, if you say how many countries in Africa, they couldn't even fathom a guess. And so when they think about Africa, they think about famine, they think about corruption, they think about civil war, they think about disease, but they don't think about people, they don't think about opportunities. But we all know that Africa, while it may be the poorest continent in the world, is also the richest continent in the world. And everybody wanted to go to Africa now because of gold, diamond, lithium, cobalt, all of these minerals. Now they want to go there for basketball players. They found out that in Sudan, a lot of the players are 7 feet tall. They're going to Africa for the music. They're going to Africa for the culture. And so everybody want to go to Africa, but Americans do not know Africa. And I've always been campaigning for more, like I went to Africa as a U.S. Peace Corps volunteer. That's how I first went to Africa. And really, when I went to Africa, I thought Tarzan would be at the airport. I had no knowledge about Africa when I went to Africa in 1973. Wow. But most Americans don't know Africa. So the challenge would be, how do we educate Americans about Africa? And I'm pushing the Biden administration. I pushed the Obama administration. I've been pushing the Bush administration, Clinton administration, to do something about educating Americans about Africa. We need seminars, workshops, educational events. We need young people linked into Africa like you wouldn't believe. Going there for vacation even. Yeah. In order for us to help Africa, we need to know Africa. And Americans, by and large, don't know Africa. Now, I think our President Kamala Harris will, in fact, do her best to strengthen ties to Africa. I don't think she would do otherwise. She was in Africa last year after the U.S.-Africa summit. She's not an Africanist, no stretch of imagination, but she is open to engagement. It really is incumbent upon us, those of us who are in civil society, those of us who are in the diaspora. We have to do a much better job of pushing our other American colleagues to care about Africa. If we don't care about Africa, how can we expect Jews and Irish and Poles and others to care about Africa if we don't show that we care about Africa? So I don't think it's necessarily up to Kamala Harris. It's moreover up to us.
Okay. You have worked with highly respected decision makers in Washington, trying to educate them about Africa because of your love for Africa, and you want Africa to be respected in the global system. How important is Africa in the U.S. foreign policy? You have worked with the Obama administration, and you have also pushed the Biden administration. How important is Africa in the U.S. Foreign policy?
Well, I don't think it's that important because, again, Americans have a real negative view of Africa. They don't think Africa matters. So we spend our time right now on, we're involved in Gaza, we're involved in Ukraine, we're involved in other places, but we're not involved in Africa the way we should. Now, I'm the person who gave President Obama the idea for the Young African Leaders Initiative, YALI. And I personally think YALI is the best program ever from the U.S. government. Now, I'm a former Peace Corps volunteer. We all like the Peace Corps, but I think YALI reaches down and tries to have impact on young Africans who are going to be the future leaders of Africa across sectors. And we're having an impact, introducing them to the United States early. It's going to have a profound impact on U.S.-Africa relations. But I think we could be doing much more to help Africa. But in order to do it, you got to lobby the U.S. government. You got to push them. Everybody else is lobbying. The Jewish constituency is lobbying. The Irish constituency is lobbying. The Asian constituency is lobbying. But not many are lobbying for Africa. And so I think we have to do a much better job of pressing for Africa. And part of this is that the Africans don't approach the United States in a real reasonable way. The Africans are not really focused on changing how Americans think about Africa. And they should do a better job. The countries are all individually divided, fragmented. The African Union is not really taking on the United States. They need to be here pressing for U.S. engagement in Africa. And I press every day, but they look at me and say, "Oh, you just like Africa. That's it." But I think the African governments need to do a better job of pressing for engagement with the U.S. and pressing for you want technology from here. You want the investment from here. You need to press for it. And I think that African people must get better unified so that we can talk directly to the Africans, Africans talk directly to us. And I think we can make a much better case for U.S. engagement with Africa if we got organized and unified.
We have a lot of African diplomats in Washington, D.C., where you currently reside. And then, from your conversation, I realized that they are not doing enough to ensure that, the issue of Africans are highlighted in the U.S. foreign policy. What challenge do you think, what is the challenge, of this? How do Africans bridge this gap, of, having equal say or equal share in the U.S. foreign policies like other parts of the world?
Yeah. Well, I think right now I calculate we got 3 good African ambassadors in Washington. 3. You got 54 countries. You got 3 ambassadors who I personally would say, wow, they're on the case. But what about the other 51? Some of these embassies don't do any outreach. You don't hear anything from them. This year, the African Union, this year, the African Union mission here in Washington canceled Africa Day. Normally we have at least an annual day where we celebrate Africa and music and festival, all that. How can you cancel Africa Day in Washington, D.C.? So I get a whole lot of energy coming out of the African Ambassador Corps. Now, I know all of the ambassadors. I know most of them. And some of them really mean well, but I don't think that they understand how to do it. And so they come here individually, fighting for their country. You got Gambia, your country, a little small country standing by itself. You got Nigeria, a big giant over there standing by itself, South Africa standing by itself, but there's not a unified effort to engage the United States. They tend to do it on diplomatic channels, thinking that something's going to change. Nothing changes at the diplomatic level if you don't have pressure coming from the people. And so I think many things that we could do to help improve U.S. policy toward Africa. It starts with educating Americans about Africa. It starts with getting more Americans to go to Africa to have a good experience in Africa and come back, and then they can actually speak and articulate support for Africa. But I think we have a long way to go to change the paradigm. And it's not just about us fighting for Africa. Africa must also fight for Africa. And I don't want to underestimate that. I think we could be doing much more then you need to, like most of the African countries, they hire lobbyists to lobby the U.S. government, but they hire white lobbyists. They don't call me up and say, "Can you help us? And here's some resources to redouble your effort to do some things." They'll hire K Street lobbyists, give them a ton of money to do nothing, and then nothing happens. So I think we need a lot more strategy coming from Africa toward the U.S. And Africans can make a much stronger case for U.S. engagement. They should be making a much stronger case if they want the U.S. to change how it views Africa.
Mr. Melvin, your organizations have been doing a lot of work, trying to bring the U.S. closer to Africa. But I know, there lies a lot of challenges, as you said, that African diplomats in D.C. or Africans should unite in order to have their say in the U.S. Foreign policy. Like, U.S. should be able to treat them as equal partners. What effort are you doing, to help African government to ensure that, their voices are heard in DC? Because this is a place where we have a lot of lobbies, as you mentioned, lobbies coming from, Europe, Middle East, to ensure that, they have their, they also have a part of the cake, in Washington, DC. So what challenges are you facing in trying to, unify African diplomats to have an equal say in the U.S. foreign policy?
Well, the biggest problem is a lack of resources. My organization is really small, actually. And in order to have the impact that you need, you got to impact these members of Congress in their district. I mean, we need to do town hall meetings all across the United States, especially in districts where members of Congress reside. And their constituents, those communities, need to be hearing from African ambassadors, experts on trade, and so forth. Like, for instance, places like Nebraska and Iowa in the Midwest, they have a lot of technical capability to help Africa. They do a lot of agriculture. They do but they have no idea that they could be doing business in Africa. They have no idea they can do it. And so, again, an example, I recently went to Mali. I've been to Mali 3 times over the last year. And of course, my government had a problem with Mali because Mali had a coup d'etat and overthrew their government. But, if you know Mali, Malians are the most nicest people you ever want to meet. Very cerebral, very culturally aware. They're very dynamic people. But so what we've done, the U.S., when it pursues issues in Africa, they tend to when they open up the toolbox, only tool they have is a sledgehammer. So the only thing they can do is sanctions on you. Boom. Wait a minute. Why were you doing sanctions? Have we talked to the people yet? So when I went to Mali, I took a trade mission to Mali in November, and several people in the administration, high-level people, told me, "Oh, don't go, Mel. The security is a challenge there. You shouldn't go. They got a military government." So I took a delegation to Mali. We had a great experience. The U.S. ambassador in Mali was very happy that we were there. We broke a lot of new ground, and came back. I told my friends in the State Department, I said, the only security that I saw in Mali was these motorbikes that got all over Bamako. The only threat I saw was those motorbikes. But I didn't see anybody say, Yankee, go home. I didn't hear anybody saying we don't want American investment. So what I proposed to the government is that before we put sanctions on a country, maybe we need to have people-to-people dialogue. I'm over there talking to people, you got all kinds of Malians here who could also talk to the people. Maybe we could have a better outcome if we were just open ourselves up to a different dialogue. The type of government that people want in the country is up to them. It's not up to us. And many of these countries have had coups because they had bad government.
Governance, right.
They had very punitive government, and all they wanted was to get rid of that government. And the best option came across as military. So I think that if the U.S. were to be strategic about some of this stuff, maybe we could have a better say in the outcomes of these countries. These people want to feed their people. They want jobs. They want infrastructure development. They want trade. They want the same thing that people want anywhere else. And so, not like the people in Mali are anti-American. Nobody said they don't like America, but we taken it because we defined what their democracy is supposed to look like, and that should be readily defined by the Malians themselves. So I've gone back 3 times, and they look at me kind of. I moved the policy a little bit, but it needs to be moved much further.
So do you think that the U.S. Putting sanctions on Mali is justifiable? Because you had a fair share, you had first-hand experience of what is going on the ground in Mali, and you realize that what they are saying in Washington and what is actually happening on the ground is 2 different things.
Yeah, we have to be more engaged. I looked at a country like Gabon. Gabon had a coup d'etat, so all of a sudden we cut our aid and all that kind of thing. Well, the Bongo regime ruled Gabon for how many years? 70 years. They wanted a change, and I'll tell you, even now, you look at countries like Cameroon, you look at Equatorial Guinea, you look at Uganda, some of these other countries. You better know that these young people in Africa are waking up. I think Kenya is only a sample of what's going to happen. The people are waking up. And most of these countries, you find the youth population like 40-50% are under 30 years of age. And so they're watching CNN. They got the technology. They know what's happening across the borders. And so I think that the future of Africa is going to be heavily driven by the demands of these young people, whether we like it or not. So I think the U.S., my advice is we should align ourselves with these young people as best we can.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Melvin Foot, the civil society leader in Washington, D.C., who has been doing a lot of advocacy to see that Africa, have an equal share at the world stage. Finally, before I let you go, have the Democrats restored their chances of a break-in the election with the emergence of Kamala Harris?
Well, I mean, I think, I don't think it's just Democrats. I think there's a lot of Republicans who are saying, boy, we hope she wins. I think there's a lot of Republicans who can't publicly say anything, but I think there's a lot of them, a lot of women, a lot of Republicans who say they hope that she wins. And so, we got a lot of work to do. And, for sure, the next 6 months around here is going to be very, very intense and very exciting. It's not comfortable being here because you feel so much pressure every time you cut on your TV and watch the news. Somebody's coming at you with some things. So at the same time, I'm optimistic that the U.S. will be okay. I think sometimes they say if it don't kill you, it'll make you stronger. So I'm thinking that my country will be stronger coming out of this, and hopefully going forward, because it's not just about an election, as you indicated. It's also about, what we're going to do about it. So if we're going to have an election, how are we going to engage Africa? And that's where I come in. I'm going to be pressing them to make sure that the next administration has a forward-leaning policy toward Africa, and that we fully engaged in efforts to not only get the minerals and to do trade with Africa, but to improve the quality of life across the continent, to stop these wars in places like Sudan. We have a lot of work to be done in Africa that we should be much more supportive than we have been in the past. And I want to say finally, I'm an African too. Just because I was born in America, I've done my DNA. 40% Ivorian, 20% Ghanaian, and 10% Nigeria. I tell my Nigerian friends all the time, anytime I start itching for money, that's my Nigerian DNA comes up. But so we're, don't lose out of the fact that we're Africans too, and we're just Africans having been born in America. That's it.
We are proud to have you as one of our own. That's Dr. Melvin Foot, the founder and the president of Constituency for Africa, a civil society organization based in Washington, D.C., talking to me live. Thank you for joining us on this show, and do have a wonderful day, Melvin.
Thank you very much.
You watching the final take with me, Seni MK Marina, exploring a week of current affairs around the world. Let's bring in human rights into the conversation, asking what is at stake to strengthen right governance and implementation in the Gambia as the government moves to restore the country's image and build a culture of human rights. Human rights activist Famara Jawane is here to tell us about the current advances and effort to build on the new gain. Bekanya, he's the CEO of Bekanya, a local human rights organization. But currently, Mr. Jawane is in New York. He's attending a human rights meeting in New York. He will tell us about the meeting. Jawane, welcome to the final take with me, Seni Marina.
Thank you very much, MK. It's a pleasure to be part of this very important program. I also want to recognize the previous speakers and the insights that they've shared with us. It's always a pleasure to share our perspectives on issues in the Gambia.
Thank you very much. There is immense consensus on the massive gains made to entrench human rights. How are these structures influencing democratic governance?
Well, thank you very much, MK. First of all, I must admit that the human rights situation of the Gambia, if you talk about the human rights record of our country, have steadily improved compared to before the change of government in 2016, December. Mm-hmm. But like you rightly said, we have a long way to go. Mm-hmm. The efforts being taken by the government, most especially the establishment of the National Human Rights Commission, mm-hmm. And also the TRRC and the government white paper that you recently discussed mm-hmm. with Professor Hussein. These are very important steps that I believe could definitely advance human rights in the Gambia and then help us rebuilding the human rights culture in our country. Essentially, we all know Gambia used to be a beacon of hope in terms of respect for human rights and rule of law until in 1994 when the soldiers came in. So again, we are trying to rebuild that human rights culture that we used to have. But yes, the steps been taken so far, including the TRRC white paper that the government has issued, reaffirming her commitments to the upholding of human rights in the country, and also the establishment of the National Human Rights Commission, among others, are steps in the right direction that I believe could advance the rebuilding of human rights culture in our country. In general, you will agree with me that MK, like I said at the beginning, the Gambia, we no longer have an environment that where we used to have 7-8 years ago, during the dictatorship, and where I'm talking about the issues of extrajudicial killings, and disappearances of people, enforced disappearances, suppression of the media, among others. So yes, we've achieved a lot, but there is no room for complacency. We've seen in the past, I'm sure you've heard about the cases of Madi Jobate in terms of free speech, and also the issues of Alaji Bora, and also Manka Mandeli. So Manka Jandeli. So essentially, when it comes to issues of civil and political rights, we are at least moving a little bit better, but not without a lot of challenges like I just mentioned right now. The recent tactics of the police. They will just call you for, interview or invite for questioning, and all for a sudden it will turn out to be a detention and arrest for you. So we have challenges, but essentially, if you ask, I would say in terms of civil and political rights, we're definitely doing much better. You've seen the proliferation of media houses in the Gambia. Yourself and myself were in the media before. You know how the environment used to be, but also you've also seen the proliferation of political parties more than ever before. The number of candidates that we had in the past presidential elections, we've never had it before, even the National Assembly elections. That tends to tell you that the space is opening, is winding up, but that doesn't mean that everything is okay in that area as well. Like I said, we have a lot of challenges in that aspect. But the area that we are not definitely doing well, if I could definitely say, is the area of economic and social rights. But we'll come back. We'll come to that later.
Absolutely, absolutely. Absolutely. I have a couple of questions because we are running out of time. I think we have 10 minutes, but we'll be able to do that quickly. Currently, you are in New York, Mr. Jawane, attending the UN Human Rights Summit to discuss the Gambia's human rights record. What's your message to delegates and Gambian back home? What did you tell the UN about our human rights situation?
Well, so just like I've just started in this conversation with you, I have acknowledged the significant strive that the country have achieved, knowing very well that from dictatorship to democracy, the legacies of dictatorship is still, hanging on. So we have those challenges, but I also acknowledge the achievements that we've registered in the Gambia. I made reference to the recent debate on the FGM bill and efforts that the CSOs, including our organization, play in ensuring that the law remains. But also, I also briefed the delegates about the work that our organization have been doing since I last attended the Human Rights Summit here, and some of the challenges that we still have in advancing human rights in the Gambia. So essentially, like I said, I have given updates about our work as an organization and what we've achieved since I last attended the summit, and the progress that the Gambia has registered, and the challenges that we still have in the Gambia, especially in terms of socio-economic rights. Yes,
your organization, Bekanyang, is known for working with grassroots organizations, especially focused on nurturing human rights at grassroots level. Absolutely. With school club engaging students in basis human rights protection and promotion program. Tell us more about this project and how it's impacting right awareness in the Gambia.
Oh, you are right, MK. So everything started with regards to the establishment of human rights clubs and human rights education in schools. Everything started after the change of government. So prior to that, what we used to do, we'll go to schools and have one-off activities with them and then just go out. But we realized that we are not making much impact. So we decided to sign MOU with the Minister of Basic and Secondary Education to give us the opportunity to engage with schools across the Gambia and establish human rights clubs and train teacher coordinators who will be in charge of these clubs to ensure sustainability. But we believe that in order for us to build and nurture a culture of human rights in the Gambia, we have to start with the young people. We have to start with the young minds. My grandmother in Woolley, who is now about 80-something years, for instance, it's going to be difficult for me to convince her about some of the rights that we are discussing right now. But the young people in schools, they have the opportunity to learn about these rights, and they will be easily be convinced that these are rights that they cannot compromise for anything. So that is the reason why we decided to come up with the idea to establish the human rights clubs in the schools. We started in 2019 with I think about 10 schools, 10 schools, and now we have 55 schools across the Gambia, covering almost all regions of the Gambia. And very soon, with partnership with Aneke, we'll also be establishing 3 more clubs in the 3 campuses of the Gambia College. Essentially, we want to catch them young. We want to catch them young and ensure that the culture of building human rights starts with the young people. As they grow up, they can become ambassadors of tolerance and defenders of human rights in their communities. MK.
Famara, finally, let's talk about one of the human rights issues in the Gambia that a lot of people are not aware of. That's the economic rights, and political rights, but more about economic rights. Tell us more about what are these economic rights that people are not very much aware of, and what efforts are you guys doing to ensure that not only basic human right, like right to go to school, right to have healthcare, right to choose your religion, apart from that, what economic rights do you think need to be highlighted? Because the country actually is going through a lot of economic turbulence. There is a lot of hardship in the country. The state cannot provide certain services, economical services to the citizen. But you hardly hear people talking about this right because maybe they are not aware. Yeah.
Absolutely. You are very right, MK. So the issues of economic and civil rights are an issue in the Gambia right now. So you talk about access to quality healthcare and quality education is a big challenge for most people in the Gambia. Decent living is a problem for many people, but most especially economic rights. People have opportunity to have decent work and decent pay for the job that they do is a big problem. Cost of living is very high in Gambia, like in many parts of the world. Therefore, the cost of housing, you had the recent debates about rent issues in the Gambia. Even today, I came across an information about that. People are increasing rent, and the salaries are not being increased. So you can realize that the issues of socio-economic rights are a serious problem in the Gambia, but most especially economic rights. A whole lot of people are finding it difficult to have 3 square meals a day. The cost of living is expensive. You don't have enough job for people, but even people who are still working, they are underemployed. And I'm sure you know what that means. They are employed, but they don't have enough to take care of their needs. And this is one thing I tell people. If we don't address the underlying causes of economic rights in our country, it's going to be difficult for us to seriously address corruption in our country.
Right.
It's going to be difficult to address issues of corruption. Everyone is talking about corruption. But it's going to be very difficult for us to seriously tackle it if we don't address the issues of economic rights. People need to have a very important job. They need to have jobs, that they could definitely lean on to be able to live a sustainable life. Again, if you see these exodus of Gambian young people traveling to Akwe, Europe, almost every week I'm seeing people dying, unfortunately. MK.
Even just yesterday, they apprehend 205 people from the Senegalese river.
Can you imagine? And now even minors are going, girls are going. You understand? So essentially, a good number of them, whether you like it or not, are economic migrants. Somebody will tell you that maybe some of them are already employed. Yes, they may be employed, but what is their takeaway at the end of the month? You want to tell me $6,000 is a good salary when bag of rice is $2,500? You want to tell me $5,000 is a good salary when your house rent alone is about $2,000 or $3,000 a month? No. So essentially, yes, people can be employed and they can still live because they are not well paid. So as a country, we must address the issues of economic rights and ensure everyone is well paid. Those who do not have the job, we create an enabling environment for them to have the job, for them to live in the Gambia. It's sad, MK. But a good number of Gambian young people, intellectuals, young graduates are living in the Gambia. A lot of young graduates are living in the Gambia.
It's a sad story, Mr. Jawane, and I think we will elevate this conversation next time. And then thank you so much. That's Famara Jawane, the Executive Director of Bay Kanyan Kafo, highlighting the stakes in building a strong culture of human rights in the Gambia. And that's the final take. Catch us next week for more insightful perspective, exploring global news and current affairs. Many thanks, Famara Jawane, joining us live from New York. Thank you for joining us on this show today.
You're welcome, sir.
Thank you. Thank you wherever you're watching. That's the final take with me, Seni Marena. We will draw the curtain here until next week for more insightful programs. Thank you and bye-bye.